Right on. So, just made myself a little 2014 NFL first rounders tier list. It's got all 32 picks. And 2014 is a really, really big draft for me. Not only do I think it's one of the best drafts in the past decade or so, but also as somebody who is born in the year 2000, I was 13, turning 14 the season that these guys started, and that was kind of the first year I really got into watching football closely. Been watching football since I was like 7, but I really was like big on all of these guys, and like I knew who everybody's name was, and I could probably name like every quarterback starting on every team at that point. And so this was like the inception of my love, my true passion for football. And so before I get started, I want to just cover some bases here. Put the link in the description because I would love to see what other people think. But yeah, so the tiers, I got franchise changing, Hall of Fame / potential, very good, meaning, really successful career, maybe a couple Pro Bowls, a couple All Pros, decent, a starter / maybe a Pro Bowl season here or there. Bad is just, didn't live up to their draft stock or just wasn't a very good player. And then total bust is a complete mishap, just a whiff of every order, and just one that people want to forget about and or just mock, and they're like, I can't believe they took this player at this spot over this other player. There will be a couple people in this spot, and this spot for sure, because this draft is so crazy. But I also want to say that I want to be judging the players on a few different factors. The first one is, and I want to take them all and combine them, but how the player performed on the team that drafted them, how they performed in relation to their draft pick. So I'm going to take into consideration the performance of a second overall player versus a 32nd overall player a little bit differently. And then just in general, how their career ended and or stands at this point. A player like Drew Brees, for example, was okay on the Chargers, but then he was fantastic on the Saints, So, yeah. And I'm going to do them pick by pick. And so I don't unfortunately have it in a complete order in the bottom here, but I have the draft order next to me. And so we'll start off with Jadeveon Clowney, who is, where is he at? His goofy ass. There he is in his Browns uniform. Pretty good player. They paired him up with J.J. Watt early on in his career and never really produced like big sack numbers. But he was really good against the run. And he's still in the league, made a couple Pro Bowls, but nowhere near a first round pick, number 1 overall, that is, especially in this draft class. I think he's a decent pick in totality, not a complete bust, but he is not on the Texans anymore, and I don't think there was ever a point where he was revered as a top tier pass rusher or even a top tier defender. Has kind of been a decent to Pro Bowl caliber player for his entire career, and in this draft class and just in general, that is not good enough for the number 1 overall pick. Number 2 overall, and as I noted with the total bust, Mr. Greg Robinson by the St. Louis Rams. Absolute total bust. Second overall pick, left tackle. I think he started hardly any games, only lasted a couple years, and I believe he's been out of the NFL for quite a bit now, a couple seasons at least. Just especially in relation to where he was taken, one of the worst, if not the worst, draft pick in the entire draft. Number 3 overall, we got Blake Bortles. This is kind of an interesting one because obviously Blake, not a good quarterback. However, there were not very many good quarterbacks in this draft at all. Like the best one is probably Derek Carr, and outside of that, I can't even think of any other good ones. But he was taken 3rd overall. Quarterbacks usually get taken pretty early, so it's not as impactful as like a defensive end or a tackle in the case of these guys. But at the end of the day, Bortles never was all that good for the Jags. He did write out his entire contract, had a couple nice statistical seasons, did get to an AFC championship, but he's bounced around as a backup, and I don't even know if he's still on a team right now. But I'm going to put him in bad. I want to say he's a total bust, but I don't know. I feel like he's not quite, he didn't bust out in flames, you know what I mean? And I will try and order them piece by piece. So, the biggest total bust will be at the bottom, and the best total bust, if you will be at the top. So, number 4, we have Sammy Watkins from my beloved Buffalo Bills. Sammy, man, the potential. They actually traded up to get him too, which makes it even worse, but I'm not going to go into consideration with that. He was decent with the Bills, but could never actually get on the field. And then when he left, he basically left and voided his presence as like a true number 1 receiver. He played second fiddle for St. Louis, Los Angeles for the Rams, Chiefs, same thing. And with the Ravens, more or less. He's not a total bust, but at the same time, based on where he was drafted, and especially in comparison to the rest of the players in his draft, I'm going to put him in. It's a bad pick, straight up. I mean, yeah. Khalil Mack, what can you say? Defensive Player of the Year, amazing with the Raiders. For some reason they decided to trade him for 2 first-round picks years after he was drafted. Hasn't quite been as good, although he is getting a little older, but still really good. Future Hall of Famer, in my opinion, kind of slam dunk, to be honest. And so he is going in franchise changing. No doubt in my mind. Number 6 overall, the Atlanta Falcons drafted Jake Matthews, offensive tackle who not only is still on their team, but has made a couple Pro Bowls, and just in general, left tackles are a pretty important position, definitely the most important on the offensive line. And he is, he's not been a Joe Thomas level, but he has been, consistently, good enough to not only make Pro Bowls, but to, get contract extensions and, not even have the Falcons think about drafting a replacement for him. And so I'm going to say he is a very good draft pick, all things considered. I know 6 is pretty high, but still, it's 2022 and he's still signed on their roster and he's still the unquestioned starter. So that's pretty impressive. Mike Evans. So, never been the top 5 receiver in the NFL, but, his trajectory, he is on pace to be a Hall of Famer. I think he has 8 straight seasons of over 1,000 yards. He's been between him and Godwin, he's gone back and forth between the number 1 option the entire time. Pretty much he's been there from Jump Street, and even put up really good numbers with not great quarterback play. I want to say I'm going to put him in franchise changing, just because I think he will probably go down as the greatest receiver in Tampa Bay Buccaneers history. Although I think it is valid to say that I don't think anybody has ever said Mike Evans is a top 5 receiver in the NFL. But still, he's a landmark draft pick in what is a pretty not great historically successful NFL franchise in Tampa Bay. So yeah, I'll say franchise changing, although he might be at the bottom of franchise changing, but still a very good draft pick. Justin Gilbert, taken 8th overall, the cornerback. Absolute bust, total bust. I think he got cut after a couple years, and I don't even think he could start at all. I think he got picked up, but I'm pretty sure he's been out of the league since like 2018 or 2019. And here we are in 2022. Yeah, he's a total bust. I don't think he's quite as big of a bust as Greg Robinson, because he was taken 8th and Greg was taken 2nd. But if you had to tell me to pick between each of these, shit, they're both terrible. Anthony Barr, taken 9th overall by the Minnesota Vikings, still on the Vikings. Kind of a weird player, not necessarily a complete coverage linebacker, if you will, but at the same time, not exactly a prolific pass rusher, but he can kind of do it all. And, he has been a very solid piece on the Vikings defense for years and years. Obviously, their defense isn't quite as good as it used to be, but still, he's a really solid player. Been on their team forever. And yeah, I think he's a very good draft pick. Not quite a franchise changer, but I'm actually, based on his draft position and just in general, I think I'm going to put him slightly over Jake Matthews, I think. He was a top 10 pick. I'm going to put Jake Matthews slightly over him, actually. But they're both very good. Moving on, 10th overall. This is our first kind of interesting one. And that is Eric Ebron, tight end drafted by the Lions. And frankly, if we're being honest, his time spent with the Lions was bad, was not good. And he went to the Colts and was pretty good with Andrew Luck for a year. And then I believe he went to the Steelers. And since he's just kind of been honestly similar to how he was with the Lions. So, he had kind of a blip in the radar. Otherwise, he's been pretty mediocre. He was taken 10th overall ahead of some really good offensive players, mind you. And so I am actually going to put our boy Eric Ebron at the top of bad, just because honestly, if we're looking at it in totality as a Detroit Lion, he's probably in the total bust, especially like I said, because who was taken right after him, we'll get into in different position, but still, and just in general, outside that 1 year in Indianapolis, he really hasn't done much. So Mr. Taylor Lewan coming in at pick 11. Similar to Jake Matthews, really good left tackle for quite a while. Lewan also has been pretty prolific for his talk on the field and things like that. Personally, if you had to ask me who would I rather have, I'd probably take Taylor Lewan over Jake Matthews. And so, yeah, I'll put him in very good. Made a couple Pro Bowls. Titans' offensive line has been pretty decent for a while now, and he's a big reason for it. And left tackles are very important, clearly, as I said with Jake Matthews. So, yeah, no problem with putting him at the top of very good for now. Odell Beckham. Oh man, this is the biggest. This might be the biggest anomaly, honestly, on this entire list, because Odell was amazing, franchise changing truly for the New York Giants. He gave them an identity, and he was on pace from 2014 through 2017. Honestly, I think he got hurt in 2017 to be one of the greatest receivers of all time. His statistical pace production was amazing, but obviously he got hurt and they traded him, so no longer on the team. It was a bit of a head case. And went to Cleveland, not a great fit, straight up. Then went to the Rams, where he was kind of third fiddle, second fiddle to Cooper Kupp, but was playing pretty well. Part of me wants to put him in franchise changing, but I don't know. This is a tough one. Because he was a franchise changer for the Giants, but looking at all aspects, he was taken 12th overall too, so kind of in the middle ground. I would say I'm going to put him at the top of very good, man. I'm going to put him at the top of very good just because the back half of his career, between injuries, dip in production, changing teams, and also kind of his off-the-field stuff, I can't quite put him up there in the franchise-changing category. But I can see the argument. I can see the argument. Aaron Donald taken right after Odell. No question, franchise changer. In my opinion, the greatest defensive player of this generation, greatest defensive player of this century. Between him and Lawrence Taylor, those are your 1 and 2. And Lawrence Taylor was a player of the 80s and 90s. So yeah, I mean, not much else to say about Aaron Donald. He's been an All-Pro out the wazoo. Defensive Player of the Year 3 times as a defensive tackle, and they got him in the freaking middle of the first round. I mean, it's the best draft pick for sure. When it's all said and done, I know I still have quite a bit left, but it is unquestioned the best draft pick. Number 14, Kyle Fuller to the Bears. This one, pretty good player. A little bit later in his career with the Bears. At first, he was kind of run of the mill, but he really turned it on. Especially that year where the Bears went to the playoffs. That was a big one for him. And so for that, I'm gonna put him in the decent category. I'm gonna put him over Jadeveon Clowney. Because this was a guy, he was taken 14th overall, so it's not like they had invested a ton into him, and he did play pretty decently for the first couple years, and then at the very end he was really good, and was a big success in their defense for a while, but I don't think he's quite in the tier of these guys, so we're going to put him ahead of Jadeveon Clowney. Pretty good pick though. And after that, we have Ryan Shazier. Unfortunately, career got cut short due to injury, but when he was on the field, in my opinion, he was a damn good inside linebacker. I was a huge fan of him at Ohio State. But unfortunately, his career did get cut short. Did make a couple Pro Bowls, and I think he only played like 3 or 4 seasons, I think, and so he could definitely have gotten better. But I think for the middle of the first round, and I have a hard time really discounting him for the injury and for the reason why his career is over. I'm going to put him in very good. I'm going to put him right behind Anthony Barr. He was a great linebacker while he was playing. Not quite a Kuechly or a Wagner, but he was in that next tier below. And so middle of the first round, take what you can get. Zach Martin, taken 16th overall, what in my opinion has been the best guard in the NFL for probably 5 or 6 years at this point, like since maybe his second or third season in the NFL. And for that reason, no doubt, middle of the first round, you get the best guard in the NFL. I'm going to put him behind Aaron Donald. Because he has been on the Cowboys his entire career, unlike a guy like Khalil Mack who was traded. These two guys are like undisputed best players at their position damn near. So, great player. Future Hall of Famer without question. CJ Mosley, taken 17th overall. Interesting player here again. Pretty damn good on the Ravens, and then was signed by the Jets, decent on the Jets, and has kind of fallen off due to, I think, a little bit of injury, and also his play, I think, has dipped a little bit, and just the Jets are such a dumpster fire that people kind of lose sight, I think, of him. Nonetheless, I think he's a decent player based on where he was drafted. They didn't re-sign him, but they didn't also cut him either. I'm actually going to put him at the bottom of very good, all things considered, because, like I said, he's been a pretty good player for the Jets, and he was a damn good linebacker for the Ravens for his career, and they took him at 17th overall, so we'll take that. Had he been like a top 10 pick, maybe he'd be in the decent category, but we'll have him in the very good for now. Calvin Pryor. We were on a string of really good players actually for a while there, or decent players at least, but we get another bust here. Got cut after a couple years. I think he had a pretty good rookie year, but other than that, he's been out of the league for a long time. So he is going to be in the total bust category. I'm going to put him ahead of Justin Gilbert because at least he did have some success early on, a little bit. Wasn't a Pro Bowl or anything, but he was definitely a bust without question. Jawan James, tackle at 19 by the Miami Dolphins, a player who was kind of decent, like a right tackle player who wasn't quite good enough to be a left tackle in Miami. Then went ahead and signed with the Broncos at the end of his contract and has been pretty good, good enough to command a decent contract. Has been a solid starter, and a solid starter at offensive tackle in the mid first round is pretty good. You'll take that if you can get it. I'm gonna go ahead and wedge him in between. You know what? He was a right tackle, so I'll wedge him in between the two. Had he been like a left tackle, I'd probably put him ahead of Kyle Fuller. But moving on to pick 20, Brandon Cooks, the player who's probably been on just as much teams as anybody in this freaking draft. And despite most of those players moving teams a bunch for being due to how much they suck, he's actually a damn good receiver, but has jumped around so many teams. He started on the Saints, where, in my opinion, he's been the same quality player everywhere he's played. Like, he has been a low-end number one receiver his entire career. He's going to get between 1,000 and 1,300 yards basically every season. And his time on the Saints was relatively short. I think they traded him for a first-round pick, though, so they recouped. And he's been good on every team he's been on. He's still performing into his late 20s. We're in year 8 with these guys. And so I don't know. I feel like you'd have to put him in very good. I'm going to put him ahead of these two guys and have him kind of in the middle of the very good section. Oh, Clinton Dix, man, he fell the fuck off. He fell off. Pretty damn good safety for several years, honestly, on the good old Green Bay Packers. But, I want to say towards the end of his rookie contract, I think they didn't re-sign him, went to Washington, then he went to Dallas, and I think he went to Arizona even. I don't know. I think for being 21st overall, I think he etched out a pretty decent career for himself early on, enough to warrant the draft selection. And so I would say he's a pretty decent player. I'm going to put him slightly over Jadeveon Clowney. He's been pretty good, but obviously you think he's out of the league at this point, which isn't ideal, but not a bad player. Johnny Manziel, Cleveland Browns, 22nd overall, total freaking bust. I'm actually going to, just based on how glorious it was as well, and since it was a draft pick, he's not. I don't know. He might be worse. Nah. We're not going to put him worse than Greg Robinson, because he was taken 2nd overall. He was taken over ahead of so many fantastic players. But yeah, Johnny was terrible. I don't know how the hell they decided to draft him in the first round. He did not project at all to the NFL, and he didn't do shit ever. He's a total bust for sure. 23rd overall, Dee Ford. Man, he was not very good for the Chiefs for his first several years. Honestly, he was in the bust territory, but turned it up his last, I want to say his 4th year maybe, and then I think they gave him the 5th-year option, or maybe they didn't give him the 5th-year option because he just didn't perform until the very end of his contract, but was pretty good with the 49ers, has been pretty good with the 49ers, and I think kind of saved his career. But if you take into consideration how he performed with the Chiefs, there was a lot to be desired, but he did turn his career around and did have a couple pretty nice double-digit sack seasons with the Chiefs. Made a Pro Bowl, picked 23rd overall too, so pretty late in the draft. I would say in totality he's a pretty decent draft pick. We'll put him in between Jawan James and Kyle Fuller, I think. Actually, nah. We'll put him at the top. We'll put him at the tippy top. He has had a lot of years though where he just didn't do anything. I'm pretty sure he had 5 sacks through his first 2 years, and he played 20-something games. So not great. Let's see. Darqueze Dennard, the epitome of a starter his entire career with the Bengals. Never ever made the leap to anything other than your number 2/number 3 cornerback. Kind of amazing, literally. He stagnated in that C tier his entire time. He's picked 24th overall, and all things considered, they didn't cut him. You know, he didn't get buried in the depth chart, but he also never boomed, you know. But 24th overall, at this point, if you can get a solid starter for your entirety of the rookie contract, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. I'm going to put him at... I can't call him bad. He wasn't a bad draft pick. I'm going to put him at the bottom of decent. He was just okay. A 5 out of 10. Jason Verrett. Ooh. Yeah. This is a sad case. Jason Verrett, really good player, all things considered. But motherfucker cannot stay healthy. I mean, this dude has missed, like, he's played 40 games in his entire career. 40. In, what, 7 seasons? 8 seasons? He's played 40 games. When he's healthy, he's good. He is good. But he's never fucking healthy. And that's not really his fault, you know? And, you know, when he was healthy with the Chargers, he made Pro Bowl, like... but you can't not factor that in. You know what I mean? I'm going to put him in the middle. I'll put him right in the middle. Right between HaHa, Clinton Dix, and Juwan James as a decent Chiefs and draft pick. Number 26, Philadelphia Eagles, Marcus motherfucking Smith. Good Lord. What a forgettable player. Been out of the league for years. Never did jack shit. He was a total bust. I'm going to put him, just because he was taken pretty late in the first round, I can't put him ahead of these 3 guys, but he really did nothing. He did jack shit. And I honestly, he's one of the most forgettable players, I think, taken in the first round in the last 10 years. Straight up. Deion Buchanan, taken 27th overall. Interesting player. Was like a big safety hybrid linebacker. You know, a dime store Jamal Adams with a little more bulk and athleticism, if you will. Never really put it together in a sort of tangible production and success, but in my opinion was a pretty good player for the Cardinals. I liked him. He kind of played a role to where it was going to be hard for him to really make a Pro Bowl, just because he didn't have a ton of sacks or interceptions or tackles. He did have a lot of tackles, but all in all, you know, 27th overall, pretty damn late in the draft. I think he's a pretty decent player. I'm going to put him right next to Jason Verrett. Verrett's a better player, but you know, he's hurt all the time. At least Deion Buchanan was healthy. I don't think he's in the NFL anymore, but still, I thought he was a pretty good player with his time on the Cardinals. And you know, this late in the draft, that's all you can ask for, really. 28th overall, Kelvin Benjamin. Yeah, so this guy, trash. Bills traded for him. He was absolutely terrible. He had a good rookie season. Then he tore his ACL, and then at that point, he never was any better than an average receiver. And he flamed out at the end of his career pretty fucking hard. I'm gonna put him in bad. I'm gonna put him behind Sammy Watkins, a little bit ahead of Blake Bortles, but not good, really bad. But you know, once you get later in the draft, and I feel like I'm saying it with every freaking player to try and, you know, justify it, but it's not a total bust at this point in the draft. It'd be pretty hard, right? You'd have to be that Titans player that just completely didn't even play and like didn't even want to play, or they'd have to be cut within a year or something crazy. Dominic Easley, Patriots defensive tackle. Bill Belichick, not a very good drafter at all. But you know, he was only on the Patriots for a couple years. I don't think he ever really started. Been out of the league for several years now. Had a lot of potential, but you know, another late round swing and miss from Bill Belichick, and I'm gonna actually put him. I'm actually gonna put him at the bottom of bad because he just didn't do anything. You know what I mean? Similar, like the difference between Dominic Easley and Marcus Smith, not much. Not much, frankly. Let's see. Jimmy Ward, 30th overall, safety for the 49ers. I don't know if he's ever been like a I don't think he's ever been to a Pro Bowl, but he has been a solid safety, a pretty damn good player for the 49ers for years and years. I mean, he's still their starting safety, and he's still making plays. And I feel like he's kind of one of those players where if he got a little bit more recognition, he probably would have made a couple Pro Bowls by now. I like him a lot, actually, and I think his longevity is not something to sneer at. And I mean, he was taken 30th overall, you know. So I'm actually going to put him. I'm going to put him in the very good section, man. I'm going to put him right behind Anthony Barr. The reason why I don't think he's quite in this echelon is he hasn't had the accolades these guys have had. But I mean, shit, dude. Like, this dude is practically a fucking second-round pick. And then the last two guys are in Broncos uniforms. We got Bradley Roby. Loved him at Ohio State. And honestly, he's kind of in the same boat as Darqueze Dennard a little bit. Was never really super impressive, although I think he was a little bit better than Darqueze Dennard. But he was never like that number one cornerback, first round type expectation, but he was taken 31st overall. So, but he was a starter throughout his entire career in Denver, and I believe he's still a starter for Houston. And so, or maybe New Orleans, I'm not sure. I don't know. I think he's etched a pretty decent career out for himself. I'm going to keep it a buck. I'm going to put him right next to Mr. Dion Buchanan because, 31st overall, not bad. And the final player in this draft, 32nd overall, young Teddy by the Minnesota Vikings. The classic, let me trade up into the very end of round one to get that fifth-year option on this quarterback, and Teddy is not a good quarterback. He is a lifetime backup. He has never thrown for more than like 16 touchdowns in a season, which is absolutely ridiculous. That sucks. But, he is started for several different teams, but he's never really had prolonged success as a starter. He's kind of the opposite of Blake Bortles, frankly. He's had some like decent win-loss success and like completion percentage, but like Bortles has flamed out a little bit, but has thrown a shit ton of touchdowns and he went to the AFC Championship. But I don't know. I don't like Teddy as a quarterback. I put him in like the bottom tier of my quarterback tier list I did. But he was 32nd overall. And with the Vikings, he wasn't a complete bust. I know he got hurt. That was really what killed his time. Never thought he was going to be a franchise quarterback though. And that's bared out pretty crystal clear. Saying a lot about him. I'm going to put him at the bottom though of the decent tier because he wasn't awful for the Vikings, but at the same time, he didn't really work out. But yep, that is going to be that's going to wrap it up, my tier list of the 2014 NFL Draft, a fantastic draft class. These players are approaching age 30 or so they still have a couple more years left in their career. But I mean, there's a string of like 8 players that were all Pro Bowlers taken consecutively. And I mean, damn near half the draft is at least very good. And there's several other players in here that, you can make arguments for. I'm sure a lot of people's isn't going to look just like mine. But if I had to say, looking back, I would say Aaron Donald and Greg Robinson are probably the two worst draft picks, or best and worst, I mean. And if I would say I was maybe overrating somebody, you could maybe say like maybe a CJ Mosley, and underrating, or maybe even Blake Bortles. I'm sure a lot of people would put him in total bust. But I don't know, since he did start all those years with the Jags and there was a year he threw like 35 touchdowns. Like, can't say he's a total bust, especially based on like Johnny Manziel and stuff. But maybe underrating Sammy Watkins or Jadeveon Clowney. But once again, as I said before, I think the biggest reason these guys are where they are is because where they were taken in the draft. So, yeah, I don't know. Comment. Let me know what you think of my tier list. I think it's pretty good.